Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 6th April 2018. The first article, Skill India urgently needs reforms. To understand this, we have to understand the skill architecture in India. You know, India has National Skill Development Mission. Here there is a governing council. Under this there is a steering committee. Below this we have a mission directorate. Under this mission directorate, we have National Skill Development Agency, National Skill Development Corporation, and then DG Training. These are the three things which we have. So with regard to National Skill Development Agency, we have certain functions. They have to develop national skill quality framework, various standards of training, and also it acts as a nodal agency for various skill development missions, submissions, which we can call it as, and it also manages labor market information systems. National Skill Development Corporation, it has to create various skill development programs in association with sector-specific skill councils. In these circumstances, what this author says is, if the Skill India has to be effective, more industry has to involve rather than the training partners. So under the skill development programs, the skill development partners, these are actually the people connected to the industry, but it is not direct training within the industry. So if vocational training and education has to get systematized in India, industry has to be involved. So that's where he talks about a new training model where there is something called industry contribution. It is called industry contribution model. And second, our training programs, these are very short-term programs. So if you go to China, Singapore, Germany, after 9th class onwards, the vocational education starts. And second, any training program related to a particular industry, it has to be at least 1 year, so that he knows everything, know-how of that particular operation. So it develops excellence. But in India, we just see training for employment. So most of these people, though on record is trained, they are not really employable. And the third, from time to time, we have to understand what is the skill gap in the country in relation to emerging technologies. So skill surveys have to be conducted. For this, National Sample Survey Organization has to be used. So if we make these changes, then the skill development or Skill India can be achieved. That is in a nutshell about this. The fake news fiasco. This is about Information and Broadcasting Minister Ms. Smriti Irani. What all the recent events that have happened, we have to recollect over here. So first there is a fight with Prasara Bharati. So Prasara Bharati is an autonomous corporation working under or working with Information and Broadcasting Machinery. So there has to be an arm's length between the ministry and the corporation. So there is a separate statute for this. And the board members of this shall not be from the ministry, but these have to be independently appointed by a committee consisting or headed by Vice President of India. So in this context, Ms. Smriti Irani wants to fill the board of the Prasara Bharati with the IAS officers, so that she will have direct control over the DD and also All India Radio. So it was resented by Mr. Surya Prakash, who is the CEO there. And the second, recently with regard to fake news, any person who has published a fake news, that journalist will lose the accreditation if he fails to prove the genuinity of the news. It is kind of a gagging of a media. So in this context, the Prime Minister's or Prime Minister Office intervention has led to the withdrawal of that particular notice. So everywhere when an action is taken, so there has to be a long-term view or perspective. So it appears that the minister is missing that. So this is what this article talks about. Was the Supreme Court right on the anti-atrocities law? So section 18 of SC/ST Prevention of the Atrocities Act is in the news. Here we need to understand certain points. So Supreme Court in its recent judgment stated that anticipatory bail can be given in SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. That is one thing. And the second thing is these atrocities are any crime or else any FIR if it has to be filed, there has to be a preliminary investigation. It means without preliminary investigation, the cognizance of an offense related to this act cannot be taken by a police station. And third, a public servant against whom, if this particular case has to be filed, higher authority has to look into it. And similarly, on a private individual, if this case has to be filed, it has to be by a rank of the officer, senior superintendent of police. These are the three things. So what is the Supreme Court's argument? It did not dilute the act in any way. Just it has introduced safeguards against its misuse. Now what are the counter arguments? So without preliminary inquiry, no case has to be filed. No cognizance of the offense will be taken. So in this context, most of the times the investigative officers in a biased caste society such as India will not be willing to file the cases. Then how it has to be tackled is the question. And the second thing is, today we are living in a world of perception and lack of anticipatory bail, stringent provisions of SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act, they act as a deterrence to commit crimes against Dalits and tribal population. So, if this perception is changed, and today if we think the law is diluted, the deterrence effect will be lost. That is the second problem. And the third above this is the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act shall not be seen as a fight between two individuals. It has to be seen as systemic social injustices that are caused to Dalits. From these perspectives, they argue that the Supreme Court judgment is going to weaken SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. The another thing is, the Supreme Court has a right to intervene and change the provision of a law enacted by the Parliament is the question. Is this judicial legislation? Is this not part of judicial activism? These are the questions that are being asked over here. Expanding the SC/ST Act. So this article talks about 2015 amendments to the SC/ST Act. There are three major amendments. The first is the number of atrocities covered under the SC/ST Act have increased. And the second is, if an accused has an acquaintance with victim, then it will be assumed that the accused knows the caste and tribal identity of the victim. So normally in the SC/ST cases, how the cases fail is this. The prosecution loses the case is this. The argument of the lawyer will be, the person accused do not know the caste or tribal identity of the individual. But if individual is known, it itself is sufficient to prove that the individual's caste is also known. This is called as presumption as to offenses. And third is willful negligence. So investigation officer, it shows any dereliction of the duty, then it will be constructed as willful negligence and punished. So these are the three provisions which have come up in 2015 amendment. Surprise softening. This article is about monetary policy committee's monetary policy announcement. So the monetary policies remain unchanged in spite of having higher inflation expectations among the citizenry. So that's what this article talks about. And the second thing this article states is, RBI has to provide certain predictability with regard to its policy stance that provides for greater stability in the functioning of industry. That is what it tries to say. Can DNA be taken for Aadhaar? Asked the judges. You know that in the Aadhaar Act, in the section 2G, it has been stated that the biometric information is a photograph, fingerprint, iris scan, or such other biological attributes of an individual as may be prescribed by regulations. So the word as such other biological attributes, it clearly states, provides power to the executive to take up any biological attribute of an individual and store it as a data. So as an extension of this, the government of India also tried to pass a law on collecting the DNA for various convicts. So in this context, This particular Aadhaar Act provides a scope for the executive to collect any biological material from an individual. So that's what the Supreme Court has asked over here. What Nepal needs is India's friendship and support for growth. You know that Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli is visiting India, and he has expressed that what Nepal expects is friendship from India. Indirectly stated, not a big brotherly attitude or a high handedness. And India has stated to have applied for blockade, accused of blockade. KP Sharma Oli was the Prime Minister. And second, the entire campaign of the KP Sharma Oli went on nationalistic lines, which was by and large an anti-Indian slogan. So in this context, a reapproachment is being made by the Nepal Prime Minister, and he clearly states that whatever has happened has to be kept on the back burner and the country shall move forward. And the second thing, the project completion, let's take Pancheshwar multi-purpose hydropower project. Mahakali power project is pending for the last 20 years. He talks about early completion of these projects. The third thing which he is discussing is this. After demonetization, there was a huge amount of Indian currency is lying with Nepalis. He is requesting government of India to take back that currency and provide for the new currency. And the most important point is, so Nepal, he states Nepal don't want to play between India and China. Rather than being seen as a landlocked country, it has to be seen as land-linked country. And there is 10-point program which it has signed with China when the blockade was going on, and he states that it is in the best national interest of Nepal. So these are the points, highlights of this interview. Society must take a view on GM mustard. So any genetically modified crop, it need to be approved by Genetic Engineering Approval Committee. Finally, for cultivation, Minister for Environment and Forests has to give his clearance. So now GM mustard is awaiting the clearance from the Minister for Environment and Forests. And retaining confidence is about Sri Lanka's government. You know that there is a national unity government in Sri Lanka, which consists of Sri Lankan Freedom Party belonging to President Sirisena, United National Party which belongs to Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is the Prime Minister. And then in the Sri Lankan Freedom Party itself, the former president, Mr. Rajapaksa, exists. The Rajapaksa faction has supported Sri Lankan People's Party in the local elections, and it has won. And finally, loss in the local election for both SLFP and UNP has led to rift. And also there are allegations of the corruption on bonds of the central bank and other issues which have widened the rift between these two. So in this context, the Sri Lanka is at crossroads. So constitutional reform, reapproachment between the communities, these have to be the priority of the government. If remembered, so UNP and Sri Lankan Freedom Party have come to power on the promise of good governance and development. That shall be the priority of the government. In the last page, I gave you the notes that is available to you at laix.in/civilsprep. Thank you very much.